morning, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. We're just waiting for 10 o'clock. We know that there's a slight delay on our broadcast. If you have joined and you'd like to ask questions, just note that you can place questions in the chat. I will receive them as you place them in the chat. And then we are recording the webinar and it will be available afterwards on the micrographics website. This morning we're going to have a look at collaboration for Revit in the cloud, specifically for Civil 3D. It's one of the applications that allows you to observe a multi-user workflow. I'm just waiting to see on my telephone if the noise is coming through, if the sound is coming through. Yes, I can hear that the sound is coming through. Just want to check my computer quickly. Apologies. Just want to see that we've got the microphone coming through. Yes, that's fine. I'll just put the input volume up. Hopefully that increases the audio on your side. Right, so hopefully that improves the... There we go. The audio is now set up to 100%. My apologies. I just heard on my cell phone that it was coming through a bit slow. We generally, at Micrographics, we generally format our computers at the end of the year, and obviously that is a Windows setting that maybe got in the way. Sorry about that, guys. I just wanted to sort out the audio, so we are ready to rock and roll. Very welcome to this webinar. We've got collaboration for Revit running in Civil 3D projects in the cloud. Not for Revit, for ACC. And our itinerary for the show is going to be just to show you the capability differences between Collaborate Pro and Docs. So many of you would have Docs because you've got an ACC collection, or you've purchased a Docs license because somebody's asked you to have one for the project that you're working on. Typical query comes in, well, what can I do with the Docs license and if I've got Civil 3D? And the answer is you can do quite a bit, but you are limited with respect to basically data shortcuts. All right. And we'll show the work in progress operations in an ACC team, the sort of structure that you can think about using on the actual project, especially if you're running the project yourself, but otherwise also in an advisory capacity. So just to enable whoever's running the project to have you set up in such a way that you can do your work. We'll talk about how you share data. And of course, when we work in multiple user teams, then the data shortcuts are very important. If you use Civil 3D, you'll know that if you've got a model, and maybe the model represents the survey data for the topography that you're putting together, the existing topography, that can consume quite a bit of information, all the points that are coming into the drawing and what have you. And so what we can do there is to just share a data shortcut, but to be able to do that, you need a Collaborate Pro license. Then sheet sets also from 2025, I think, somewhere in 2025 it came in that you can now use sheet sets. If you're just using a Docs license, previous to that you needed a Collaborate Pro license, you can do that. And then in conclusion and question and answer. So very much welcome. Then the first item that we're going to do is what are the differences, and this is very important. So if you've got ACC docs, you'll see what's common between ACC docs and ACC Collaborate Pro. And FYI, this has changed over the years. It used to be that you could only do XREFs. Things like your survey database and sheet sets wasn't available if you had a docs license. That's changed over the years, 2025. Now we've got XREFs, survey databases, and sheet sets being available on the cloud. It revolves around permission structures, and we'll have a look at that as well. But that's possible if you just have an ACC docs. You'll see that it's common to the ACC Collaborate Pro. XREF survey database sheet sets, they're common to both packages. What's different in the ACC Collaborate Pro is the data shortcuts. And data shortcuts, if you work in a multiple user environment, we call it a co-authoring environment. That's the technical term. That will enable you to use data shortcuts. There's not much in the sense of slides from here on. We'll be demonstrating using the actual software and just showing you what's going on. First of all, work in progress operations on ACC Teams. And it says most companies have their own folder setups. That's if you are running the actual project. And in this webinar, I present the micrographics interpretation. So we've tried to scale this platform as much as possible for the biggest possible project that we could possibly manage. We won't go into much detail. There's a lot of detail to delve into if you really want to go into that sort of nitty-gritty, but we'll show you the overall folder structure just so you can understand how we're interpreting the platform. The platform isn't locked down in the sense that they're not doing all the work for you. You have to do some of the work and make your own decisions in the way that you set it up. Usually that could be done by the BIM manager and and sometimes the information technology. Or maybe the manager or whoever, but whoever sets that up, they have to understand how it operates. And we find that a lot of the time people do understand, but sometimes they don't understand. And so we'll just show you how it works. And then we talk about silos. Silos are isolated places where people work. We call that sometimes the work in progress operation. So if you think about a silo as a work in progress folder, silos are created, and this ensures professional liability. Many people are of the opinion that everybody should be allowed into a project, and that is actually dangerous. And if you look at something like your PROXA standards in South Africa, most of you will be familiar with that. It speaks to professional liability, and the example that I usually hold up would be that of a structural engineer that is responsible for designing, in this case, say a bridge in Civil 3D. And if the structural engineer gets it wrong and the bridge falls and kills somebody, then that person is liable because they are the structural engineer. And so you don't want anybody else to get into that design, because ultimately it's your professional liability. You have to take responsibility for your design. And similarly, we extend the same courtesy, or professional liability would be a better word, to each discipline. So that would be the architect, the mechanical engineer, the civil engineer, the structural engineer, whoever it is. You've got your responsibilities, and therefore we'd like to keep other people out of your work, because if they change something and mess up your design, then you don't want to have to be held responsible for that when things go wrong. All right, so there is a rationale behind what we are doing, and that is the important bit. All right. I'm just remoting into our Port Elizabeth office here because this is a nice strong computer, and I'd like to show you the Autodesk Construction Cloud. If you haven't seen this yet, there's a lot that you can learn from this. Many companies are using it. There's a lot of information you can gain from here. It's just www.construction.autodesk.com. Interestingly enough, there are multiple regions that you can store data in. We do not currently have an African server or a South African server. And so for most of you that operate in South Africa, you'll probably have the European server. And that's because the data laws in Europe are much more stricter than what they are in South Africa. And so we would tend to keep our data in South Africa. There's no technical difference between the two in terms of capability, just the data storage, and you can't work between hubs because of this. It's a geopolitical data law restriction, and the way in which Autodesk Construction Cloud is set up is that it records in real time, and so you can't recreate a project on another hub. All right, so that's just one of the things to take note of. Usually there's a lot of nuanced conversation around the projects that you might put up, and we advise you to contact us at Micrographics so that we can advise you before the time. We tend to understand the platform in its entirety, or well, from a 32,000 foot level, but that would be, just from a high level overview. We understand how these things are put together, and while we might not know every single capability of the cloud, when it comes to things like your cost databases or some of the other platforms that bolt onto this cloud, we can definitely tell you how to set it up, or how to get started. All right, so this is the Autodesk Construction Cloud. This is now in an actual project. It's not about the construction cloud, it's more about Civil 3D and how you use it on the construction cloud. So this is just an example. So if you had to go through all the steps to set up a project, this is what it would look like. And we are dealing with two platforms. The one is docs and the other one is design collaboration and model coordination. So the design collaboration and the design coordination, those would be what you get with the Collaborate Pro license. One is about clash detection, and the other one is about design collaboration. And this is one that we'll be focusing on today, the design collaboration part of things. This is the Autodesk Docs license. All right, the Autodesk Docs license you get with your AEC collection. I'll show you a document that we normally refer to at the beginning of a project. For those of you that are interested, we would start out by listing every company, every user, and the role that they occupy. And then depending on the phase of the project, typically in the design and the build phases, there is also the operational phase. But that's where the digital twins and things like Eptura come in, the operation software. But for most of us, we will be in the design phase, or we will be in the build phase. And specifically in the design phase, over here, we can see that we've got those two licenses that come into play. And so what we would say is we've got the model management, or the design phase, the pre-construction phase. That's when we go on site, or just before we go on site. It's basically the less pre-construction we have, the better, because pre-construction issues we have, the better, because it means that our model information going onto site was sufficient. We don't have too many RFIs or issues or snags coming through, and we're manufacturing or building accurately, and so there won't be too much pre-construction issues, hopefully. But if they are, we can manage it in this phase. And then we've got the construction operations. All right, so we just from a design phase, from a build phase, that's how we look at the licensing. The BYOS basically means bring your own subscription. It is a model license of Autodesk. If you own one of these licenses, then you can bring that license along to any project that you are invited to. So you don't need to buy extra licenses if you join other projects. It could be on any hub, geographically, geopolitically, it doesn't matter. You can be wherever, on whichever project that you are invited to. And then we've got the host. So the host could be purchasing licenses if the other parties don't have licenses, and can allocate those licenses to the other parties by assigning them to their email addresses. And the host must always take responsibility for the usage under the EULA, but that is also quite often done with respect to the person running the project saying, well, you guys will be using these licenses. If you haven't got your own, we'll get one for you and assign it to you. And there would be some sort of contractual recouping of that money during the project. So that's one thing to notice. All right, so looking at the docs license, you'll see something interesting. If you zoom out, there are some green areas and some red areas. And those green areas are where the application is of interest to whoever is using it. So this is applicable, all right? And you'll see that on the doc side, at least, everything that's green over here, it's a common shared capability across Collaborate Pro, Build, and Docs. It's shared between all of them. But as you move on, you'll see that the Autodesk Collaborate Pro license then comes into its own. It's green, and then going down, the Build license come into its own. All right, we won't be paying attention to the Build license. It's just to show you that there's definitely a capability difference between Docs, which is common to Collaborate Pro, and Collaborate Pro, which is not common to Docs. All right, so a Collaborate Pro license is more powerful than a Docs license, specifically when it comes to collaborative environments and working in teams. And there we can see the design collaboration gives us the timeliner, the issues, project status, the changes, meetings that we can record, correspondence that we can record. Basically, the project gets an email address and we can track that. We can bridge teams in the timeliner. That's just if you're working with a client, or not just a client, but with any party that doesn't want to be part of the hub and be overseen by the hub or by the project administrator. If they're sensitive in information that they don't want to release, maybe they don't want to give you live models, only static models, whatever the case is, if they're not comfortable on that project, you can always bridge them in so that they just share IFC files with you, and they can do the management of their own cloud separately. So there is a sort of bridging of teams. So pretty much most of the exceptions that a party would raise with respect to joining a project could be managed that way. To bridge teams, they must be in the same geographical location, and that's just a licensing issue. But again, you know, if you're wondering about how to set it up or what to set up, then you can always contact Micrographics. We can have a meeting with you. Settings, there's design collaboration. And then also on the model coordination side, that is where we can clash detect with the models. We won't be paying too much attention to that right now, although there have been some good advancements with the way in which the cloud manages civil 3D models. But specifically the design collaboration side of things, there is where collaboration comes in. And this is then the platform, what it looks like. This is the Docs license. This is the Collaborate Pro license. The folder structure that you set up, and here we get to the WIP. You'll recognize this from the webinar intro, that we've got a work in progress. That stands for work in progress. Work in progress. There's a description next to the folder structures, which makes it very useful. That's a recent addition in 2025. I think they brought it in, but there's a work in progress folder structure, and that work in progress folder structure, we typically make this invisible to everybody on the project. It's a bit difficult to illustrate on this specific project, but in essence, each folder is managed by permission settings. All right, so you can see that the administrators, they've got the full permission on this folder, but nobody else has got any permission on this, not view, not anything. And the reason we do this is we're saying that if you think about this, so there we can see the task teams, or the disciplines. I'd like to call these disciplines. People refer to them as task teams. There's general architecture, general civils, general geomatics, clash detection, client models, MDA. Those are just things that I store. Mechanical and structural. All right, so there you can see you've got your disciplines. Now, what we are saying in the work in progress folder, and it's important to understand how you use your Civil 3D, especially when it comes to your data shortcuts, is that this is these are the silos. We refer to silos or work in progress folders, and we are saying that you working in there, it's no business of anybody else what you're doing in there. And you shouldn't be basing your information of what anything or anybody is doing within those folders while they are busy designing. So we're saying each separate discipline is doing their own thing in there, and it's got nothing to do with anybody else. And so we leave them at that. All right. And then within those disciplines, in this case, we're dealing with the civils team, or with the civils task team. Now we can see over here that there are subfolders in there. So this is heavily dependent about how you name the actual folders. So over there you can see both of them are prefix. We usually do that sort of a shorthand naming. The reason we do that is to keep the file path short. Basically, Windows has a file path limit when it is on your computer and synchronizing with your hard drive via the desktop connector, which is something that you install when you get the Autodesk Cloud. It looks something like this, and you can choose which projects are being synchronized to your hard drive. And they then go and sit, whichever ones you choose are going to be on your Autodesk Construction Cloud. And there you can see the path to, say, this being through your C drive users, and then you'll see my name there, PFS. All right. So that PFS, basically, it identifies me via my Windows user. And so you can already think that, well, if Civil 3D is pathing data shortcuts using C drive users PFS, what's going to happen to C drive users Tom, Dick, and Harry? Well, maybe those shortcuts won't work. All right. And so what the Design Collaborate Pro does is it resolves that issue with data shortcuts, which is why, and it's exactly the same way that it works with Revit and Plant 3D and others as well. So in any case, that's just what's happening. We're working on the cloud. It's kind of like Dropbox. It's synchronizing through Autodesk Desktop Connector onto a hard drive, and this is where we're at. So the B is just work in progress. The CX is the discipline. That's going to be general civils. And then the next little bit of information there is which team it is. So what I've done over here is to say, well, I can have multidisciplinary companies, vertically integrated. They could have architects, civil engineers, structural engineers. I can accommodate them by virtue of FX, meaning company micrographics. And even within those disciplines, within those companies, I can have multiple teams. And that's where the 1, 2, 3 comes from. So all of these teams are from micrographics. It's obviously a representative project. There are no other companies that have joined us on this project. We are doing this as a demonstration, but there are 3 teams from micrographics that is within the civils discipline. So that makes it easy. Then within our folders, this is now the teams folders, what's happening within those folders. So specifically, if we look at number 4 over here, we've delved further, and this is basically where I want to jump in and to explain to you that if you look at the folder structure, you'll see that I've now included an there's a further complication here in the sense that I've incorporated the idea of bridging teams. That's the A that you see that. So you can just imagine that we are bridging a team. And then the next bit of that information would be, okay, something is within Civil 3D, something is within, or something conforms to a Civil 3D surface that was shared. It's the file type there. Then we've got our DWGs, that's just normal AutoCAD drawings. We might have InfraWorks models. We might have recap clouds. We might have Revit models. And then there's something called a team, right? And the idea is that set up a folder for yourself for Civil 3D only, and then expand it. And then you can see, oh, look at that. It looks very much like a Civil 3D project. And that's one of the reasons why I would recommend you to do that, is so that you do have this sort of folder going on there. And we can actually use this folder to set up our own project as well. And within that, you can then see, well, there's a place for data shortcuts, right? And that would be the idea. Then we've also got the team. And what this team represents is a folder that shares information with other teams. And within that, we've got a consumed folder. So in the consumed folder, we'll then have information from other teams that are shared in. All right. Now, this team that you see here, and why I'm harping on it, that team is what is exposing itself on the timeliner. All right. So over here, you can see a timeliner. This is a bridge team, but in our case, we're CXFX4, which is currently the active team. And there we are. So if we share information, we call it creating a package, then within docs, whatever we've sort of reviewed into our Teams folder from our Civil 3D design for our BIM manager can now be shared into a visible folder, which is visible to the other teams. When we're ready to share, we will share into this folder over here. And this is what they refer to as the one version of the truth. And you can see anybody with project access can view that file. But that is the one version of the truth. And if anybody ever has a dispute about which files were shared, this is where they are, and they'll be versioned. So each, you kind of keep the file names the same, and the next time you bring it in, those will be versioned. All right. So that is what is being shared through this process of the timeliner. And when you consume a package, then from the other teams, it will be copied into your folders, where you, in your own silo, in the work in progress folder, you've got complete control of it. So you get a copy of a copy that belongs to you. It would be the same idea if somebody sent you a WeTransfer or a Dropbox or an email, and they attach the file, and you then link that into your project. Point is, you've got control over the files that you've consumed. And that also speaks to the data shortcuts, because you might be working on between companies. So that would be the company level. So FX1 wouldn't be visible to FX4, wouldn't be visible to FX3. They'd be working independently. That's within the work in progress silos. But so each one of these would actually be a silo. But within the shared folder, this would be visible and consumable. And after it's consumable and it's consumed, it will be internally visible as a copy of a copy to the silo. And that, in fact, is where you can create your data shortcuts from. So over here, for instance, you can see that an FX3 Civil 3D model was shared, and I've actually started including the file type into the numbering of my file. So I understand that it's not just a DWG, but it is actually a Civil 3D model. So that's just on the projects that I run. And then you can see, all right, this is my Civil 3D model that was shared from Team FX3. And that's great, because this is where I can create my data shortcuts from. So that would be the important thing to realize in terms of the way in which this folder structure is put together, right? And you can see that this is, I'm using the docs platform to view my files, and the design collaboration platform doesn't have a files tab. And that's because, well, when you buy design collaboration, it comes with the docs module. So you've automatically got this available to you. All right. So there's the timeliner. This is what manages this, the sharing of information between teams from within a silo into a shared container from which it could be consumed into your team. But the folder structure might stay the same whether or not you've got a Design Collaborate Pro license. What says that you start off a project on Docs and you later decide, well, you want to upgrade and you want to get a Collaborate Pro and get this going? Well, then your folder structure is already set up in such a way that you can manage that. And so whether or not, I usually show this to clients and I say, well, it might be too complex for your project, or it might not be complex enough for your project. Let's try and understand what your projects are. So these projects are very sort of customized towards whoever is running the show, but we typically like to know how are the folders set up and how can we accommodate the users. And to do that, and also because I like to have things within templates, we typically have this sort of management of folder permissions. What you can see on the left over here on the permissions key, let me just highlight that in yellow and then take it back to what it was before, just so you can sort of focus your attention there. Here we've got no access, view, download, upload, upload and edit, or full control. And those are the permissions that you can have on folder structures. So the roles are typically applied per teams. So here's an example for the CXFX4 team, the one that I've been holding up as a example. You can see there's a BIM manager, there's a team member, there's a BIM reviewer, there's a team leader, and there's a BIM author. All right. So within that, you would find that there are users. In this case, these are just our training licenses that we use on our training computers that we use to sort of trial the the platforms that we put together, and you can see whether or not they've got the capability applied over here of the role. Okay, so if it's on a role, then is it applied to that user? So is CT5 is a team member and a team leader. All right. Then we get into the actual folder structure. You can recognize that it's not exactly the same team structure, but it's close. And then we can see that we've mapped then permissions onto those folders. So those are the sorts of things as BIM managers that we do to accommodate the users of Civil 3D so that they can actually do their job. Okay, and that now is the, let's just get back over here. So that would be the, sorry, I'm just looking for the controls for, that would now be the work in progress operations for the ACC team. So as we've mentioned over here, most companies have their own folder setups. That's true. Just looking at my folder setup, you might decide it's relevant or it's not. Then I just presented the micrographics way of doing things. It's something that we've scaled as much as possible. I work together with a colleague, and we had a look at how things actually work in operation to get those roles up and running, but your cases might be different. And then we say silos are created, and this ensures professional liability, as we've discussed. So that's why we've got these work in progress silos. Sharing data, we said Docs and Collaborate shares data differently. Collaborate Pro is better than Docs at this. It was designed for secure sharing. We've just discussed it with respect to the folder structure. What you've got in Docs is the ability to create a transmittal. This is something that is, so if the project is run on design collaboration, we generally, what I found in practice is teams that use, or projects that use design collaboration to share model information, they dislike it intensely if somebody does a transmittal. And the reason they dislike it is because it bypasses the official sharing of information process. So in Docs, you don't have this sort of official, globally visible sharing of data that you can see in a visual timeliner like this. Instead, what you need to do is, if you wanted to share a file or files, you would then create something that we call a transmittal. And a transmittal is just applicable to certain people, and you would fill in a long list of people to send it to. They would get an email, and then, or a notification, email notification, and that email notification would then say to them, oh, here's the link for your files, you can download them. And what I would typically do is, and I'd say, well, okay, so from here, I now need to go and copy them or download them and then upload them instead on my work in progress folder. So that I'd then go back into work in progress. After I got that notification, I'd download the files. Or if somebody's got a copy, if you're able to view and copy the information in the folder, you wouldn't be able to move, but you could copy it into multiple folders. You can see when you copy it, you can choose where you want to copy that to. If you were the sort of manager of this project, you can then copy that into everybody's folders individually. So that would be a very inefficient way of working. And there's no real tracking of the information being shared. You have to rely on somebody else reacting to an email notification, whereas the BIM Collaborate Pro just manages that automatically. All right. But the upshot is, whether or not you use Docs or Collaborate Pro, you'll typically have a shared folder, and from the shared folder, you'll work backwards into your work in progress team, and then you'll have some consumed information within your silo, and this file that you've consumed is the file from which you create the data shortcuts. So you shouldn't expect to be able to use data shortcuts from a different silo. It must be within your own silo, or you have to create some other shared resource where you create data shortcuts from and give everybody access to it. Typically not something that is done in places where we need to ensure professional liability, but in any case it's possible. And so this is the process when we share the information and where we can then create the data shortcut from. Then we get to the actual data shortcuts. So the things that, like your XREFs, your survey database and so forth, that can be set up within Civil 3D. So in Civil 3D, if you are running on the projects, you can see that you've got the normal recent folders that you might have been working on. And then there's the Autodesk projects over there. So if you're running projects in the cloud, you can see, or you should see, that the folder structure is replicating itself on the work in progress. There's the platform that's the project that I'm working with. There's the project files. There's the work in progress folder. Within the work in progress folder, there is and I can see everything within my Civil 3D because unfortunately I'm an administrator on this project, so I see every folder. If you weren't administrator on this folder, and if you only had, say, access to CXFX4, it will only show you the path to that CXFX4. So it wouldn't be as complex as this. It would be much simpler to manage if you were bound by permission structures. And there's CXFX4. Within that, we've got our Civil 3D files. There's our Civil 3D file. This is a file that I might be busy working with, and one could open this file. Now, only one person at a time can work with the file, and it will lock that file. So you can see already that this is locked by Paul Storm. All right, so something went wrong, and I can just unlock that file from the platform over there. Let me unlock that file like this. Okay, and the reason it locks it is if I'm busy with it. In this case, my computer crashed earlier this morning, and so it kept it locked. My apologies, but you can unlock it. And if you then open that file, it actually just opens that file directly from the cloud. So this is your work in progress that you could be doing. All right. Now, let's suppose you wanted to create your own folder structure. How would you do that? Okay, and just with regards to the databases, you'll see that if you do create databases, survey databases, if you did, you could then go and create survey databases. You can set the working folder, and if you set the working folder, you'd be able to point to your Autodesk Micrographics Cloud. There's the project files, work in progress, general civils, team, and then there's Civil 3D. And within this, you would then want to have your survey data. So that might be your survey folder. Select the folder. And then we can set working folder. Let's try that one. That unfortunately is not yet done. Let's just go back one. Just see something quickly. So I'm going to see if there's anything in there in the survey folder. That Hartebees hook 94 low 19. So there's actually no info in there to start with. So I can actually create that then as a new database. I'm just going to copy that folder name, delete it. Yes. And then one can create that survey, select folder, and then create a new cloud survey database. That would be Hartebees hook low 19, just for any incoming info to come into that folder. As soon as I do that and I create the database, you'll see on the folder structure on that computer, which in this case is over here, there we can see that the almost there Civil 3D survey Hartbees hook, there it is. So it's created the survey database within that Hartbees hook low 19. I've actually been I was too deep there, so unfortunately that is a pity. But in any case, that's me making a mistake, and I just have to do that again just to get it into the correct folder. It's just there to show you that you can come on, get out the way. Okay. All right. Go to folder. Sorry, we're having an issue with this computer at the moment. Civil 3D survey. There it is. There it is. Okay, that's still busy synchronizing. Internet's a bit slow over there. I'm just wondering how I can get this thing. Ah, there we go. No. Okay, so I know this is sort of in the way. Apologies for that. So whether or not you've got a Collaborate Pro license, you can hide or create the data, the survey database on the Autodesk Construction Cloud. I know how to fix this. It's just I haven't got the time to do this now. We'll run way over the allotted time. I'm just trying to see how can we get rid of this interface. Can we hide this somehow? Make it smaller. Data panel. No. No. No, no, no. There. Okay, so I can't find a control to actually hide this at the moment. This is a bit embarrassing. I don't know what I'm missing over here. Am I missing a trick? Okay, so this is FX6. Let me close Civil 3D quickly. And let's remove the project. Select projects. We can get rid of micrographics. FX6. Save. Okay. Okay. Let's fire up docs again. That would be a desktop connector. Apologies for this. There's our desktop connector. Let's give it a few more seconds. Let's see if it comes up with the dialogue. There. Okay, there we go. Still processing. Shouldn't take too much longer. Come on. Okay, just waiting for the interface of Autodesk Docs. Okay, that's rather embarrassing. Let's come on. No. Okay. There we go. Let's do my own computer. So my resources will be a little bit stretched on my side. It's not such a strong computer as what's on the other side, but let's just continue with the webinar nonetheless. I don't want to waste your time. And let's go with the Autodesk Construction Cloud. So you've got the same folder structure over here. All right, so there's the docs and the Collaborate Pro. And we've got our Civil 3D. And we've got our Autodesk projects. And here we can see our folder structure. All right, so this would be the same as me going home and then working from my home computer as opposed to my work computer. And then it goes there's the team, there's the consumed files. And then within my own Civil 3D, there's the folder structure. So what you can do is, if you do have what I find usually works best is if you have just a blank Civil 3D file, there's the NCS metric. We can use that for now. And then we could go with the settings, and under manage, with the data shortcuts, setup, you can create data shortcuts. You can set data shortcuts for a project folder, new. You can associate projects. All right, so if you set the working folder, and you then have to navigate to the project where we are working, there you can see that we've got FX4A. There's our Civil 3D folder. Now I basically want to show you that I can create something similar. And I essentially want to create a new data shortcuts projects folder. So the working folder is this. The name is going to be, I'm just going to say BLG for blog. All right, so it's within that parent folder. That's the name. And I am going to use a project template. And when you use this project template, you can see in this case, it's just the default. All right, so this is what Civil 3D comes up with. And if you have a look at that, then that, come on. That's actually got a folder structure. Let me just try and see if I can follow this. Control copy. There we go. All right, so in the sample project, you'll see that it's actually got folders in there. It's got folders for documents, external references, production drawings, reports, source drawings. You might even want survey in there or whatever you've got, but that would be a folder structure. And that folder structure will then replicate in that folder. So a lot of you would know this sort of workflow. And when you do that, you can see that it creates a folder on your computer. So that would be over here under your projects, work in progress, civil 3D, and there's your BLG. So there you can see your BLG, there's your shortcuts. There's your data shortcuts. It automatically now creates the shortcuts history from over there. Okay, that's where we create our data shortcuts, and that's where we'll be putting the data shortcuts. Right, so if we wanted to create data shortcuts for our project in BLG, then that's the way that we would manage it. All right, so in essence, it would be within Civil 3D. So I'm just showing you that that's how this would have been created. And inside the data shortcuts, you can see exactly the same folder structure over there. So we've got our team folder with the consumed files from Civils 3. And then we've got our Civil 3D folder with our folder structure. This is incoming. It's a copy of a copy coming from outside. This is our working folder with our data shortcuts folder. Right, so if I had to open, remember I can open this because it's within my own silo. All right, so if I go into my own silo and I go and have a look over here under my teams folder, there's the consumed folder, and my BIM manager has given me permission to open this file over here. Right. And then also there is the file that I'm working with, which is in my Civil 3D folder under, well, wherever it is. In this case, I'm just working in here. There it is. And if I open that file, then I can say where my data shortcuts is going to come from. All right, so over here, we've got our data shortcuts folder. Currently it's set to work in progress. We can change that. We can set the working folder, and we can say that that's going to be Civil 3D shortcuts. Set the working folder. Set the data shortcuts. It's not in there, it's just one deeper. Okay. Oh, come on. It's this folder here. Excuse me. Set the data shortcut project folder. There we want to be in Knopal. Set the working folder as this folder over there. Civil 3D. Refresh. Now it says the path doesn't exist. Okay, why is that? Let's try and follow it explicitly through the users. There's DC docs 6 project files, work in progress, Civil 3D 4, Civil 3D, select folder. For some other reason this thing doesn't want to play ball at the moment, apologies. Let me just save and close Civil 3D, see if it behaves. I see we're running out of time here. It's permanently synchronized. It can't be that it's not synchronized. Okay. Come on. So we're just waiting for this to close down. I'll just fire it up again quickly and just see if we can gain control of the capability again. So there would be our Civil 3D. We're not getting any errors on the desktop connector on this side. Everything is actually behaving correctly. We're just going to see that we can create I've done this multiple times before. It's not something that's new. It's the desktop connector is playing up at the moment. Apologies for that. So if I use Civil 3D, there's our file. Just open that file quickly. Can we set the path for our data shortcuts and prospector? There's our data shortcuts. That's the active drawing. That's the prospector. Yeah, there's the data shortcuts. Yeah. Set the data shortcuts projects folder. That won't be picking up at the moment because we haven't yet set the working folder. That's the working folder. I'm going to set the working folder to Civil 3D. Oh, this is so embarrassing. I don't know why it's doing this. It's supposed to pick up the working folder from the Civil 3D. Select the folder. Okay, and then let's do set the data shortcuts. It's not picking it up. This is strange. So apologies for that. I know we're running out of time. And like I said, you should be able to set the working folder. Let's see. It's not setting any folder over there. Apologies for that. Great. Crazy. Let's just try this. New data shortcuts folder. Sets the working folder. So it's picking up when you set the working folder. If we set the working folder to this level, create new. Let's call it BL1. Now let's use a project template. Let's do that. Not populates. That's strange. And then we can set the working folder to the shortcuts. Then it disappears. Undo. Yeah, so as soon as you create a new data shortcuts folder, it actually picks it up. So this is problematic. Apologies for this. It's not behaving like I'm expecting. And it's picking that up. Anyway, apologies for that. I know we've reached 11 o'clock, the end of the webinar. In principle, the idea would be to create the data shortcuts project folder and then to create the, now it sets it. Unbelievable. Then we could share the data shortcuts from there into our other drawings, right? The process works. I don't know why it's working not now, but you should be able to set the working folder to the relevant folder. If you do that, then it probably, maybe it takes time to show up. I'm not exactly sure why the synchronization is so slow today. Apologies for that. I was hoping to demonstrate this for you, that you can create your data shortcuts, and within the data shortcuts that you can then share your things like your surfaces. As you can see, it's something that I have done before. It is possible, it is capable of doing that. I just cannot explain to you at this moment why the software is behaving like it is doing. So apologies for the unsatisfactory conclusion of this webinar. I will definitely troubleshoot and see what's going on there, and possibly do a follow-up blog. So apologies for that. In principle, it will work. So sorry about that. For those of you that are here, we can, if there are any questions, then please go ahead and ask. And I've been watching the chat messages. I see there's no messages coming in. Just note that there are also some links that we refer you to. There's the Autodesk Construction Cloud. You've seen that already. Autodesk University. That speaks to some of the items that we've been discussing just in university lectures. And then we've also got the micrographics webinar series, of which this will be part, and the micrographics blog. And I will follow this up with a micrographics blog. I'm not particularly impressed with the way that this has concluded. My apologies. You should be able to set the working folder without having to create a brand new data shortcuts project folder. Once you've set the folder, you would be able to pick up whatever is in here. So if I set it to Civil 3D and I select that folder, this path is supposed to show up there. So apologies for that. I don't know why it is doing this at the moment. And if I set that path up and I say new data shortcuts projects folder, you can see that it is picking up the path. It's just not displaying it on the Civil 3D dialog. So I might follow this up with a case for Autodesk as well, just to say, well, look, why isn't the path actually showing up here? Is it a time sensitive thing, or why is it doing what it's doing? So apologies for that. It says the path of the project you select does not exist, which is crazy. So there's definitely a bug in here, and we'll handle that with Autodesk and create a case. So apologies for that, and until next time, thank you for attending, and until next time, please enjoy your Civil 3D. Thanks. Bye.